Right, working on repairing the rear guard from the passenger side, which I want to mock up in position there on some brackets, so then I know exactly how much room I have for the rear window to come down before it hits this. I've got to make sure that that all works in, and then I've got something to work off. So I can get it accurate. I've started doing the rust repairs and everything like that. This is all from the brace, and this is where the running board attaches, so that's what these three slots for. And so I'm about just pulling that apart, about to make up a new piece. But the biggest problem with this one was that it had been stretched apart, so it got hooked, and I've already repaired that area, but it got hooked and pulled backwards at some point in its 90-year life, and stretched out in a further 50 mil or 2 inches than the opposite side. So when you held the two face to face, they were completely different. So these supposedly are actually made by Willys and not Holden bodied, but they fit them to the Holden body, and they obviously don't really take a lot of care to line it up in the same spot. I can't physically get it near the Willys factory holes, and so the mounting screws on the inside of the body just look like they're being hacked out with some tin snips, and they look, and both sides are done exactly the same way. I don't know if it was done in the factory or what, but it's horrendous. Because this curves around, you can't go in any further, so you're stuck with that sitting out there. So yeah, it's obviously, they were well known just to make things work rather than starting from scratch. So that inner wheel hub is probably used on something else, like a Vauxhall or something, who knows. They made so many different things. So it's probably better if I show you. You can see the inner well hub over there, and so those captive nuts is what's holds it in place. And here you can see, and what I was talking about with the window is these obviously didn't go all the way, because look, you got the height here, there's no way there's that window height down to the bottom, so they obviously stopped short. Otherwise there's no way that distance to the bottom of the door, and the inside of the door stops here, not at the bottom edge here, and then they had a wooden frame in there. So yeah, I don't know, it must not come down very far. But as you can see here, you can't move it in any further. You can see some of the captive nuts and everything in there. But as I said, to measure from that point here to that point there, this was 50 millimeters narrower, but this one doesn't show any obvious damage. I have knocked out a big dent that you would have seen in the mock-up photos that was in there, and there was a little bit of a crease where this, along here, where this was folded inwards, and I've pulled that out, but that's it. And everything else seems to line up all right. But that side, as soon as I took it out, I had a hell of a time, and then it just sprung apart, and you have to use podgies and everything to get back in, and that's why I've been shrinking it down, and because the other side was flat through here, and I've got it to within 5 millimeters or 5/16, so it does fit now. If I can get that last little bit, I will. But I want to make some more repairs first, because this could be throwing out my measurements too, because it was all buckled, but I couldn't use it in the English wheel, the very last bit, because of all the rust and the brace on the inside. So this is actually supposed to be flat for the running board. So anyway, these are just little things that take a lot of time, but first I was just going to shove it up there, but then you want something. You don't want to make your panels fit to something that's not accurate in the way it's going to remain later. So I'll probably be removing most of that inner lip and just attaching directly up that way, because it has to go in past here, and then it'll start getting in the way of the shock absorber on, and on the other side there's a charcoal canister mounted up in here as well. So because we've got a lot deeper, wider tyres obviously going in underneath. Some of the other things I'm doing, and I'll probably do a little bit more before I finish, why this is being worked on is that this was actually completely flat or straight through there. And so what I did is I cut sort of an I shape out of that and knocked it through, locked it back, because compared to the other side it had a nice continuous curve, but this one suddenly sort of segmented. So right at this point here, it's still got a bit of bend left, and then it's also still quite straight here, and this width across here is also greater than the other side. These must have just all been hand rolled, I presume, even though this was done in the Willys factory in the US. They're different left to right. So I think I'll extend this a little bit more, where I'll take a little eyebrow, if you like, out of there, or half sort of fairy tale moon, and then knock this back a bit, then weld it back up again and get a little bit more curve in there. Before I finish welding all this up, this I made the same as the other side in the width, but it really needs just that tiny bit more curve to it. So I just cut along there, and just holding my other hand against the back and then hitting the nylon with a rounded head. Moved across, and I use this to straighten the flange back. At the moment it's actually overlapped the cut, and this is sunk down, but that's alright. I'll just cut more away until I get the shape I like, and then trim it up and level it all out. Not sure why, but some of the people that do this for a living like to keep their final weld prep or finishing off secrets, but this is just what I use. I don't know what they use, because they say, oh, we need to keep secrets, but this was once a 9-inch cut off wheel, and then it wore down until it was 5 inches. Then I put my 5-inch grinder, and when it no longer fits in that, it goes in here. So I've just got a washer in that fits inside this disc to centre it, and then there's just a washer each side to hold it in place. So I don't know if the lighting is good enough, but I just go along, if I can, on a slight angle like that. I go across the top of the weld like this all the way, and I take it smooth with that before I go in and then do it with a flap disc and then a strip disc. So anyway, I don't hide secrets of the way I do it, probably because I don't pay for my work. Well, there you go. Hopefully it doesn't burst someone else's bubble. So, just showing you some things that I knew was coming up, and I thought I have to address this sooner rather than later. Now, what that was is that I was worried that if I want to run this sitting exactly the same as it was as the SRT. So for that to happen, I've got to make sure that the up travel in the suspension and the clearance above the tyre when it tucks up is also the same as when it was in the SRT. Now, with the Willys, this actually sits 2 inches, or just a bit over 2 inches, or 50 to 60 millimeters lower. The problem with that is that when I put the inner guard back in again, it followed this curve here, which tells me to have adequate clearance above the tyre, this needs to be raised up until I have exactly the same clearance as it did from the factory. So as you can see, I've only still got this piece in here tacked in, because I was thinking if I do have to raise it, then that's no longer the right size, because don't forget, this is not the running board. The top of the running board, well, the bottom of the running board rather, that this edge has to line up with is here. It's the bottom of that body. So as you can see how much there, because what I've done, I've set the back height exactly as it was in the Willys and then just rotated the whole guard up, rather than just lifting the guard up and then have to extend that back half, which has got a reverse curve and everything, which is a very complex, and then putting the other half of the extension here. I just rotated this around, keeping this exactly where it is. So I just kept lifting this front edge up. And it's remarkable, look at that curve. It follows extremely close between the Willys and what the upper inner guard was. So that's pretty good. But it means that I have to make a whole new piece here that goes all the way down to the bottom of the body shell. Now, one thing that concerns me is I have to make this edge continue all the way down as well. And this is not just a simple bead, this is a bead that then wraps around wire that's inside here. And I've never done that before. So I don't know if the light is good enough. No, the light's not good enough. I'll see if I can show a little bit of light here. Grab a head torch and you can see what I mean. So this wire is actually inside there, and this wire, and this gets wrapped right around it. There's special tools and everything for it. I don't have any of those things. And there's even now bead rolls to help you do that. So I'm going to give it a go to see if I can just do it with the tools I have. Now that's one piece wire, runs all the way around here, all the way there, and stops here. So I'm going to have to extend that all the way down to here and put this step in it. The first step I can put in using one of the step dies on the bead roller, and then I'll have to use a tipping wheel to tip this so it's inwards. And from memory, you go from the fold out 2.5 times the diameter of the wire diameter to have it wrap around that wire, because this wire and the joint has to be it should be in two different places so you don't have a stress point. If I cut this right across and then cut the wire as well, I'm better off taking this bit back out, carefully cutting around here but leaving the wire sticking out, join onto that wire before everything gets rolled around and then extending down. So as you can see, that's quite involved, and I've never done it before, but I'm taking on these challenges to learn new skills. If I don't challenge myself, I don't get a new skill. So it's always easy just to do things that you've always done, and they're quick and easy and not stressful, but you don't learn anything either that way. Okay, even though it looks very sketch, I'm a little proud of this. I've put the rear end in, back in. I took measurements to make sure I knew where the wheel arch was when it was sitting out, measuring from the bolt location to the centre using a laser line right up the middle. But I thought, gee, what if I'm out? Because when I have the Willys wheel arch rear guard sitting in there, it's not centered according to my measurements. It has to come back an inch. It's possible because this is cut out just for the plastic inner guard that they've left more clearance towards the rear than the front, but I have no idea. But anyway, I had to get it back in just to make sure, and when I go to work out what wheels and everything to get, I'm going to need this back in place anyway. I remember struggling to get that trolley underneath, lifting it up by myself and trying to kick it under, and I suddenly thought, well, why not leave it on the trolley, put a great big 6x2 piece of timber underneath it, and jack trolley and all up, and then put the bolts in. I mean, I carefully positioned so it would balance itself, and well, it worked flawlessly. So apart from needing a different angle when I got to the top, it came out really well. So that's pretty cool. All right, you wouldn't believe it. The stock Willys wheels, or the ones that came on it, not stock. The stock ones were steel wires. These are called Jumbo General rims, and they were to sell these balloon tyres of the time. And these are the 16-inch version. They also came in a 15 and maybe even a 14. I think 14, 15 and 16. So here's the biggest one. Now, even though the stud pattern is different, this is 5 and 115 instead of a 5 and 114.3, so only 0.7 of a mil difference over the diameter, so half of that again for the radius. But the holes are quite wallowed out, and so even the 14 mil wheel studs fitted in the half-inch that the Willys takes. And what's more remarkable is that the diameter of this tyre is exactly to the millimetre what is stock on the SRT. I mean, these two are just made for each other. So these came in a 20x9, and this is only a 16 by 4.5 or something, or by 6. I can't remember. Oh, the 4.5 is for the stock ones. I can't remember what these are. But there's a good 3.25 inch gap between here and there, and it's hard against the Brembo 4-spot caliper there, let alone the front, which would be enormously different. But I'm hoping that with the Brembos, front and rear, that I can run an 18-inch wheel instead of the 20 to get more sidewall height. Obviously, can't achieve this, but with an 18, you could achieve that with about a 60 series tyre, depending on the width you go. So it'll give you a lot more sidewall. It would just be an inch in radius all the way around what you see here, so that's not too bad. Okay, so trying to select. So what I've done is I've made a fixed bracket that holds the wheel, well, the suspension at ride height when I measured it before I pulled it down. So from what I seen that I photographed, this should be ride height now. So this has been raised a total of 60 millimeters from the Willys. So that shortens that area up between here and the window sill to 60 mil less than stock, believe it or not. And I'm only adding length to this end. I have to move this shape because it changes to the running board. So the running board here, this is even actually supposed to be flat. It has to go from that flat to this more bulbous shape. So everything has to move down 100 mil. So this shape here I've got to move that down 100 mil. As you can see, it is way different. So you can see how much of this curve here has to flatten out, and then from that point there, 100 mil further back, this same shape has to be there in the end. So there's a lot more to it when you've got such a shape change, as you can see there. Oh, excuse me. How much from this point to that curve that I've got to take into account. So moving that shape down there 100 mil, and this shape here comes down 100 mil, and so on and so forth. That's got to transition nicely. But I think it's still easier than doing it anywhere else for that matter. Because it's changing, it's pretty consistent from about from here back around. But you've got this transition here at the front, and because this needs to be repaired anyway, I've got to soften that curve here and move metal into this area here, and I'll wheel all that change in and then match the new piece that will go in there to continue that change. So that transition is still going to need a lot of work. So, yep. That's going to be all fun and games. Right, I hope this works. My thoughts are to try and reproduce this. So you've got a step and then it goes down. I don't have anything that I can do that narrow with, but I can create first this step before it then goes down and wraps around the wire. So I've basically made a template of this curve just by turning this upside down, running a pen along there, and so you end up with this. So I measured the depth of that first bead. So what I'm going to do is pass it through here, and that's the same depth, and it has about the same, set it up, see the offset there has to also be the same, because this is not vertical. If you look there, you can see the angle. So I'm trying to reproduce that as best I can. So it has to be offset between the inner and the outer. And I've got to decide how much that is. So I should put a little test piece through first and then see how close I am. Right, I've done a little test piece just by eyeballing it, and I've gone slightly too wide because it shouldn't fit over this. It should be same as that there. It does flare out a little bit. There was a lot of damage in this area. Yeah, I think it just fits a little too easily, so I've scribed slightly narrower on what I hope is going to be the piece I'll keep. So I've scribed along here. And this represents from the top of the curve to the inside of there. So it's a little bit narrower than what it measures, but by the time you pull up on it, I'm hoping that that'll work out. I mean, this is all, I've never done this before, tried to make that form. So I'm about to find out, I guess. So what I've done is initially this was turned around and the groove was on the other side. I used that to pass through and start the fold, and then I swapped that around so I could get a little bit of a sharper bend and pulled it up like that and passed that through to, this is the profile I've got now. I've done a little bit of tapping on it just to bring it to 90 degrees, and I'd already made up this little piece of just mild steel that I'd shaped in the curve to repair some of that damage behind the wire. So I just basically ran this over and tapped it until it was 90 degrees at the moment. It's fractionally loose. And you see it sits beautifully like that, but it's a material thickness out. But I think, or hoping, that when it starts wrapping, I have to wrap that round to the wire, I think that will pull in that little bit. But that gives you an idea. As you can see, the continuation of that curve down to the bottom. So I've left all this on here at the moment because I've basically got to follow that shape from here up, if you know what I mean. So when I cut this off and then move this down, I will soften that radius to then blend in to the radius as it exists here. It'll make more sense. I can't explain it, I'm sorry. But the next thing is I'll use this as a place to check how my progress is going, and then I'm duplicating the factory round to to the fold, to the point here. So from this point to that radius, I have to put that now into this piece, and then I'll trim this piece off. I'm going to cut right across here without cutting through the wire. So I'll carefully go around the outside, this is what I'm hoping, slide it off the wire so you've just got a piece of wire sticking out, that little bit, and then join the new piece of wire to that here, and then slide this on and then fold it over it. That's the hope. We'll see what happens. So anyway, I better get to it and keep shaping. I was just looking at this, and I'm going to see what it's like just to pull this over here just to get the shape, initial fold in the right areas before then I'll start any hammering and wheeling to perfect the shape. So I'm hoping that I can just pull it over to start with before putting any stretch into it. Why not? getting some shape to it, so already that gives me the direction for which to follow. So I don't think I can do much more than that on here, because really this here needs to be stretched. So that's what I'll work on next, but it's given me at least a start. And I'll put that over probably a sandbag and then hammer in the corner, probably using my probably the big fender hammer, something like that, the top one. Alright, just spent a few minutes, but you can see it's coming along. So obviously I can't film and hammer at the same time, but I've been hammering with this in the shallower part of the curve, and this one, I think it's from memory, it's hand-built tools from Peter Tomasini. I think I remember picking this up from him when he was just around the corner. But that's what I've been hammering in the corners. So just moving it back and forth like that, and then switching over to this one. To get it like that. So you can start to see the curve starting to form, and to go from a shallow curve to that tight one. So obviously a long way to go yet, but it's coming along. So far so good. Alright, I've done a little bit more, tiny bit of wheeling in here. I can't go very far because basically my highest radius anvil can only do the very end, which is good to smooth that out, but this all has to be done by hand. And then I've got a much shallower one. I don't know if you can see that, the tracking marks. Basically V'd up and down like that on both ways, because it has to flatten out, remember. This is supposed to be perfectly flat once the brace goes in, and then bolts onto the running board. But even just quickly like that, it's amazing how quickly that has come up. And apart from in the corner, I've just been using a piece of pipe and then using this diameter down a bit further, using the slapper there, and working on it that way, just moving it back and forth, just tap 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 tap, because I'll go down to some smaller bars. These just ones that I've made myself. I mean, this whole thing just something I whipped up and made a heap of different accessories for it. Bits of steam pipe, that sort of thing. I should have got ones with a shallower radius. I think it'd probably be more handy. But we're getting there. Okay, I think we're about ready for the next step. I've actually tightened it up so it doesn't actually sit as well, but that's because things like this fold here are now the right width, where before it was all slightly oversized, and the same with here. But what I want to show is that it's going to fit here, and now, there you go. Look how much different that goes across here. Look how much different that the guard has to be made now to fit that shape there, because that's the shape of it up here, and you get down here and it just shows you how much development I have to put through here once this patch has been taken off. That shape there has to be here for this whole roundness, so this flat area doesn't start too high. I want it to start right back here. So just, you can see there just how much difference. A bit hard to tell, but anyway, this has got to go. So all the development now is, I'll probably actually leave this patch on for the moment just to help keep the shape, because it makes it easier when you're working on the wheel and hammering, that you don't overstretch that edge too easily, and also you're not dropping off and on with the wheel. So I can start developing this out until it matches this shape now. Alright, I was able to, without damaging the wire edge, cut that patch off straight across without going through that wire. So I'm pleased with that, because it's a better practice to not have the wire join and the metal join in exactly the same spot. So I've been shaping this up. Remember, this was almost completely flat here, and so I put all that shape back in again. And that's right. I haven't altered the shape of this and then made this part suit it, because it has to, that blend has to happen below that line now. And as you can see here, we're coming along just fine. So the next is to make sure that that radius there is going to sit fine once it's on. I might put a couple of panel clamps on there and just hold it up, make sure that that is the correct angle that I want. And then I've got to cut that flange down until it's, from memory, I read this years ago. It's not something that a lot of people do. It's wire edging. I think it was 2.5 times, because, let's see if I can find somewhere. Here it is. So this is the piece that was on here. As you can see, it just fits on there like that. And here you can see how it wrapped around that wire. It doesn't go all the way around. If it went all the way around, it would be, what, 3.14265781. Sure, it's going back to the 80s when I memorised a formula of pi. I don't think that's actually 100% accurate. It was just what my calculator had. To wrap all the way around the wire, but as you can see there, I hope it's focusing. So I forgot to put my glasses on. Focus. Or was it just my eyesight that's not focusing? It could be either. The curse of old age, but it's better than the alternative. It only goes part of the way around. So from my memory of it from reading years ago, someone posted that was 2.5 times the wire diameter. And this might even be less than that, because I'm sure that depends on how far around that wraps. Maybe I should uncurl this, and then I'll know exactly what it is from there to match the factory. That's probably the easiest thing to do, rather than cutting and then finding it's too long and then I can't wrap it in. So yeah, it's coming along. It's just I'm happy that I got all that off. That shape and this now matches. So hammer and dolly work over stakes, even old shoe lasts. I've got a whole series of shoe lasts. So what the cobblers use, and as you can see there's another one down there. I've bought a couple of sets of them, and they're quite handy for these odd shapes when you're trying to get in. I couldn't do a lot of wheeling because on here I had a strong enough wheel that I could do this edge here and then there, so that wasn't too bad, but I still end up, I'm not good enough on the wheel that I still need to go in with a dolly, put that under here. As you can see, I made sure this was, actually changed the radius of this a little bit to suit this, and then used the slapper to shape it after I put the initial in with the big huge fender hammer, and also using the slapper. Where's the slapper? There's the slapper. Over just the biggest pipe there, just to get the initial, remember, because it used to come to a point. This was a point before, just to get rid of that. So things are progressing. Hopefully I'm successful in rolling the wire around. I even been playing around, and I've been cleaning up this because it was full of dints and it varied in sizes, by running a combination of rolls. This is the last one I came up with there. So this fitted inside between there and the wire, and this fitted on the outside to force it into a consistent depth, because the depth for some reason was different in some spots to others, and in some places this rolled up and some places was flat. So I've run this through the bead roller with different dies that I've just got to even all that out. So, all right, quick mock-up. So I put some panel clamps on just to make sure that this radius sort of flows. I'm unsure, I hope I don't have to make it again, but I have a feeling that this needs to be more vertical at the end to mate with the running board, which is not currently, although it has dropped. As you can see, that gap's opened up a little bit just with me moving it around. So I've got to make sure that when this attaches, that this might need a bigger kink, even though this is a duplication of what's up there, what was there, because everything's been rotated around. This is going to want to come out more, which might even mean pulling that line in tighter all the way down to there.